Good afternoon and welcome to another session of our online conference. Today we have this program over 3 years after Rouhani's presidency. Our today's guest is Dr. Alejo Vidal-Quadras. Dr. Vidal-Quadras is a renowned European politician with a long distinguished political life. A nuclear physicist by training, was the Vice President of European Parliament for 15 years. Currently, Dr. Vidal-Quadras is the President of the International Committee in Search of Justice, a Brussels-based think tank. Dr. Vidal-Quadras has been very active on the issue of Iran and the Middle East for more than a decade and has become a familiar name for those who follow the issue of Iran and the affairs of the Iranian resistance. ISJ has done several major studies and reports on pertinent topics related to the Iranian nuclear program, the threat of Islamic fundamentalism, and the role of the Iranian regime, and most recently, a comprehensive study on the Iranian regime's parliamentary elections and its followed. Dr. Vidal-Quadras, welcome to our conference.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
We are almost 10 days away from the end of the third year of Rouhani's tenure as the Iranian regime's president. How do you assess his record? If you allow me to break it down onto different topics, of course. First, how do you assess the Iranian regime's human rights record under Rouhani?
Well, unfortunately for the Iranian people, the record of Rouhani's presidency in relation to human rights is really atrocious, because there is only one fact, one figure that can give us an idea of what has been this presidency. During these 3 years in office of President Rouhani, 2,400 people have been executed in Iran, which is the highest number of executions per capita in any country in the world. And all these people that have been killed, executed by the Iranian regime during these 3 years were either small offenders for minor offenses, or members of ethnic or religious minorities, or peaceful dissidents, or bloggers, or any opponent to the regime, even the most peaceful of them. So this figure of 2,400 executions gives us the reality of Rouhani's presidency. He is not a moderate. He is even worse in terms of human rights, more cruel than his predecessor.
Yes, correct. Dr. Vidal, have you noticed a change in the social discontent in Iran, like a surge in strikes, protests, and another shape of popular demand?
Well, you know, in a political environment like the one of the now in Iran, which is so repressive, with a regime that is so oppressive against their own people, to do any kind of opposition is really something heroic, because you must be a hero to oppose this regime, because the consequences of the slightest sign of dissidence, of opposition, is prison, torture, and most probably death. So it's really very difficult to do any opposition to a regime of this brutality, But in spite of that, in these years, we have seen in recent times many hunger strikes of political prisoners. We have seen protests, mass protests in the street, strikes of different sectors of society, like street vendors or truck drivers or teachers. I mean, and that gives you an idea of the gravity of the problems of the Iranian people, because, as I said, any kind of opposition can take you to the gallows. So the fact that, in spite of that, there are so many protests reveals the desperation of the Iranian people.
Yes. What about any improvement on the Iranian economy, or the prospects are still bleak?
Well, the Iranian economy is a disaster because, first of all, it's not a free economy. So most of the economy is in the hands of the Revolutionary Guards or affiliated organizations. So there is no free competition, and the economy cannot be efficient. As every economy does it in the hands of the states, basically, it's very inefficient. There is inflation. The situation of the financial sector of the banks is also extremely weak. They are, many of them, not to say all of them, technically close to bankruptcy, and any prospect of for Western companies or for other economic players to be present in the Iranian market and do business normally is just an illusion, because, as I said, the regime that controls so severely the economy will never allow free competition with other economic players.
Yes, exactly. On the regional level, have you seen any decrease of the Iranian regime's meddling, or have you seen some sort of scaling down or expansion of the Iranian regime's meddling? I will appreciate if you can share with us the role of the Iranian regime in Syria as well.
Well, under Rouhani's presidency, the intervention, the meddling of the regime in places like Iraq or Syria or Yemen or other countries in the region has not only decreased, but has increased. We have published very recently a report in IAJ International Committee that I have here one copy. It's a report called Islamic Fundamentalism Roadmap to Defeat Daesh. And this report that has been published today, you can find it in our website. And in this report, we analyze the situation in the region, in the Middle East, and the role of the Iranian regime in all these crises. And to give a very concrete answer to your question, during Rouhani's presidency, the presence and the meddling of the Iranian regime in Iraq, Syria, has increased. Now, the regime has 70,000 troops in Syria. So we can say without exaggeration that Syria is an invading country in Syria. Syria is invaded by the Iranian regime because 70,000 troops is an invasion. There are about 10,000 revolutionary guards. dozens of thousands of regular troops, and of course thousands of militias, of mercenaries that come from Lebanon, from Afghanistan, from Pakistan, from Iraq, paid by the Iranian regime, that what they mostly do is to massacre the Sunnite population in Syria and Iraq. And that has as a consequence that these desperate people fall into the hands of Daesh, of the Islamic State. So to give you an idea of the tremendous effort of the Iranian regime to back Assad in power in Syria, we estimate that they spent about $25 billion every year only in Syria. So this is another reason why the economy of Iran is so disastrous, because they invest a great part of the resources of the state in warmongering in other countries.
So, in a nutshell, is the regime weaker or stronger now? What's your take on that?
Well, I think that all these interventions in other countries, this expansionism, and also the terrible increase of repression, incite repression, with thousands of executions and persecution of so many innocent people, that proves the weakness of the regime. Because when a political system is stable and is sure of itself, does not need to repress their people in this terrible way. So the more cruel the regime is with the Iranian people, more clear is that they feel unsafe, they feel weak. And also the meddling in Syria, the invasion of Syria, proves also the weakness of the regime, because the President Rouhani and also the Supreme Leader Khamenei, they have stated that they fight in Syria because if they do not fight in Syria, they would have to fight in Iranian soil, in Iranian cities. So if you ask me if the regime is stronger or weaker than it was in recent years, I would dare say that all signals indicate that they are weaker.
Okay, I would like to shift to a topic a little different, Dr. Vidal. 3 years ago, when Rouhani became the president, there were some in the West who became very excited and claimed that Rouhani is moderate, and the West should deal with him. Where are they today? Where are we today? Has this optimism faded away? How would you describe him and his role?
Well, unfortunately, in many Western countries and in many Western governments, this illusion is there and it's operating, because after the signature of the nuclear agreement, many Western governments, European governments mostly, they have arrived to the conclusion that now there can be dialogue with the Iranian regime, that they are ready to open their economy, they are ready to cooperate against Daesh, and that a new era in the relations between Europe and also United States and Iran is starting. And unfortunately, this is just an illusion. This does not correspond to reality. The regime signed the nuclear agreement not because they changed their mind or their objectives or their strategy or their ideology, not at all. They signed the nuclear agreement by the fact that they were obliged to do it because the pressure of the sanctions was taking them to complete disaster, and they had no other mean than to sign. And this situation now must be understood by the Western governments, that the nuclear agreement by the regime is just a tactical move. It's not a change in the fundamentals of their vision of the world or of their strategic objectives in Middle East. If the Western governments do not understand this, they will fail in the relation with the regime, because what worked with this regime, the only way to deal with them is to is pressure, diplomatic pressure, economic pressure through sanctions, requesting them human rights respect. But if you relax the pressure on them, they will immediately jump on the occasion to fulfill their objectives.
Yes. Dr. Vidal, we all remember that last year, after the nuclear deal, there was some sort of hope by some in the West that the Iranian regime has changed, and this will lead to a change direction by the Iranian regime, and economy will improve. Two questions here. The first one, has the economy really improved? And if not, why? And has the Iranian regime changed its conduct and activities at home and at abroad? That's the first question.
Yeah, well, the economy, as I said before, has not improved at all, because it was said that there were 150 billion of frozen assets that would be defrozen because of the nuclear agreement, and that this injection of liquidity in the Iranian economy would contribute to improve the situation of the Iranian people. But this is another illusion, unfortunately, because first of all, the volume of these assets is not as big as it was supposed. It's not at all 150 billion. It's perhaps a third or a fourth or less of this amount. And also the Iranian regime, because of his military adventures and the military nuclear program, for instance, and its intervention in Iraq and Syria, in Lebanon, Yemen, they spend huge amounts of money in these wars. Imagine what is the cost of having only in Syria, as I said before, 70,000 troops with all the equipment. So it's crazy. So an economy that is mostly in the hands of the state, so it has no efficiency, that is a closed economy, and that is a war economy, cannot improve. I mean, so there is no hope that while the regime is in power, the economy can improve and the Iranian people can improve their life standards. And you also made another question. There was a second question.
Yes, my second question is, some in the West talk about an active role for Iran in solving the crisis in Syria and somehow in Iraq. Do you think this is a sound policy? What's your idea about that?
Yeah, we go to the same conclusion here, no? That the analysis that lead to the conclusion that now Iran can be an interlocutor, can be a partner in solving the problem in Syria, is unfortunately not based on reality, because facts contradict this vision. The Iranian regime in Syria is on the ground with a very big number of troops and equipment, and their fight, their effort is to back and to save Assad. So this is the reason why they are there. They are not there to fight Daesh. This is secondary for them. So with the pretext, with the excuse of fighting Daesh, they are on the Syrian territory, and what they do mostly is to fight, to massacre the democratic opposition to Assad and the Sunnite defenseless population. And the reality is this, and you must also see what happens every week there, and you see that all their military effort is not against Daesh. It's mostly to back and to hold Assad's power and to massacre the democratic opposition. So any hope by the European External Action Service or the Western governments that Iran would be a partner to solve the problem in Syria is vain.
Yes. I know you have followed the issue of the Iranian dissident in Iraq. What do you think should be done by the international community to protect the residents of Camp Liberty, members of the MK?
Well, as we all know, the solution for the people residents in Camp Liberty is resettlement in safe countries, in democratic countries. The Iranian regime has attacked these defenseless people several times, both when they were in Camp Ashraf and now in Camp Liberty, with attacks that were extremely brutal. I remember the attack in Camp Ashraf with 52 victims. That was really a crime against humanity. And also many other attacks with rockets during the night, treachery in a very treacherous way. And in total, the people in Ashraf has lost about 130 people and hundreds of injured people. So it is a duty of United Nations, of the United States, of the European Union to ensure that these people can live safe and protected according to the Geneva Convention in Camp Liberty until they are relocated in safe countries, in democratic countries. Because of the situation now in the region, the risk of another attack, of a massive attack against Camp Liberty is very high. And so that means that precisely because of the new scenario, United Nations and United States and European Union must give priority attention to the safety of residents in Camp Liberty.
Yes. Regarding Iran, What kind of policy would you propose to the West in general and the European Union in particular? Would you share with us your view and thoughts?
Well, when a policy works, you must not change it. And we know which kind of policy works in relation to the Iranian regime. It's pressure, a combination of diplomatic pressure, of economic sanctions, and of extreme survey of human rights compliance. In United Nations, for instance, the High Commissioner for Human Rights has produced several statements and reports condemning the situation of human rights in Iran. Also, Amnesty International. Why the Western governments do not do the same? And they are blind in front of all these abuses of the Iranian regime against their own people. If we relax the pressure, if we let the regime follow their own path, at the end, they will fulfill their objectives. They will reach their goals, which have not changed. So the nuclear agreement for them is a tactical move. It's not a change of the fundamentals. I'll give you an example. In recent months, there have been several tests of ballistic missiles with ranges of 1,500, 1,700, 2,000 kilometers, missiles with the capacity to have payloads of hundreds of kilograms, able to transport a nuclear warhead. This has been done 2 months ago in violation of several resolutions of United Nations and in violation of the agreement they have recently signed with P5+1. So I think that if we ignore reality, we will fail. The policy that works with the Iranian regime and in general with totalitarian regimes of this kind is very well known. Pressure and more pressure and support to the democratic opposition to these dictatorships.
Yes. Dr. Vidal, I assume you will be attending the major international gathering in Paris on July 9, Free Iran. What message you hope it will convey to the Western policymakers, in particular the Europeans?
Well, I've been attending the annual gathering of the Iranian democratic opposition in the world for several years. And it's an event that I recommend strongly to attend, because the fight against the Iranian regime and its repression of their people and the threat they represent for peace and stability in the world must be, at the end of the day, be concrete. It must materialize in concrete action. And this annual gathering is really the strongest and most evident expression that there is an alternative for the Iranian people. There is a different way. There is a way to democracy, to freedom, to equality between men and women, a way to democracy, to a prosperous economy. And this is there in the annual gathering, very clearly manifested by all the intervenants and the ambience, the climate there is so full of energy and joy and hope that I think that it's something worth to see and to participate in it. And of course, I will be there again this year, and I recommend strongly to all political representatives and dignitaries from so many countries that will be invited to accept the invitation and be present in this very important day for democracy in the world.
Yes. As you mentioned, you have attended to a number of annual conference and gathering by the National Council of Resistance of Iran. May I ask, what has been the most eye-catching aspect of these conferences for you, and how has it evolved or developed over the years?
Well, of course, every year the gathering is impregnated of the problems of the moment. There is something that is always the same, is always constant. That is the opposition to dictatorship, the defense of a free Iran. But according to circumstances, I remember, for instance, when the main problem was to be delisted from the blacklist. And then there was a fight in the courts. There was a battle in the courts, a juridical battle. And this, fortunately, this is now achieved, and justice has prevailed. But every gathering is influenced by the circumstances of the historical moment. And this one, in particular, I think will be the gathering of the truth against illusions. So after the nuclear agreement, as we have been saying during all this conversation we are having, after the nuclear agreement, there is the illusion that the regime can change, that the moderates have won the election, that they can be a partner against Daesh, the economy of the Iran will be open to foreign investment and foreign business. And this is not true. This is just a mirage. And if you believe in things that are not true, you make mistakes. And I suppose that many of the speakers and the messages that we will hear this year in the gathering, the annual gathering, will be that do not believe in lies and look at the facts. Be attentive to reality and accept the truth.
Yes. So, as a follow-up question, why do you think this year's gathering is different and is more significant?
Well, as I have just said, the difference this year is that the gathering will take place while there is state of opinion in the media, in Western countries, in the governments, in many analysts, that a new period of relations with the Iranian regime has started, and that there is hope that the regime will open, the regime will change, the regime will be more respectful of human rights. And this, as I say, is not only a lie, is untruthful. The problem is that if we fall into this trap, the consequences for us, for the Western world and for democracies, will be extremely damaging. And I suppose that this year, the annual gathering will be dominated by this issue.
Dr. Vidal-Quadras, thank you very much for joining us in this conference.
It was a pleasure. Thanks to you.